Of course, it would certainly help if Tom Homan doesn't know. It would certainly help if he came to find out about what our next guest knows. And that is the groundwork that's being done by groups that are apparently tracking the license plates and information of the ICE agents, the federal agents, and maybe even working with state government to grab some of that. And joining me now is none other than Millie Weaver. Millie, welcome back. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. I'm happy to be here. It's great that you're covering this issue because this is such an important issue that's going on right now in our country. What we're seeing, Brandon, is we are actually seeing a coordinated effort of these leftist NGOs, affinity groups, which I know you've had me on before. We've discussed these exact same groups and some of their subversive plots and plans to really to steal the election from Trump in 2020, as well as pre-planned January 6th. But now we're seeing that Trump is in, this is his administration. Meanwhile, these guys are working from inside the government and also outside with their street agitators, professional Antifa rioters, to try to essentially overthrow President Trump. That is exactly what they're doing. These guys are in their groups, in their meetings, they're sharing documents, PowerPoints, literature, really educating their people on how to overthrow an authoritarian, how to overthrow a dictator. The idea is to use Gene Sharp's coined color revolutionary tactics, his playbook of nonviolent civil resistance, which there's really nothing nonviolent about it, Brandon. It's actually like they'll use violence, they'll use rioting. What they mean by nonviolent is that they're not actually going to like full-blown warfare with the government, with guns and tanks and shooting. What they mean by nonviolent civil resistance is what you see: the rioting, the civil disobedience, the smashing windows, burning buildings, taking buildings over. That's all in their playbook, essentially, of what they've done before and what they'll continue to do. But what we're also seeing is this coordinated effort, Brandon, to disrupt these ICE raids, okay? And in their own literature, which you guys, I've given you guys a copy of, there's what's called dilemma demonstrations. So what we're seeing with these ICE raids are actually called dilemma demonstrations. And the whole point is to put the person in power, which in this case, it's President Trump and the government. It's to put them in a dilemma where no matter what they do, they're in a bad light or a bad situation. So the idea with the ICE raids is either they're going to successfully stop Trump from conducting ICE raids by making it such a hassle, by interfering, by causing chaos, by causing, incidents to happen like we saw with Renee Good, by making it such a headache and a nuisance and a problem, right? The idea is maybe he will just stop and then they can further their agenda. Or the alternative is, on the dilemma, is that he will push harder and continue, and then they will be able to utilize propaganda, information warfare to show him in a bad light and to make him look bad. This is all intentional. They're intending to provoke him into a response so that they can point the finger and call him a dictator and authoritarian, because Gene Sharp's playbook only works if the ruler, the president, whoever they're trying to get rid of, is viewed by the public en masse as authoritarian, abusive, dictator-like. So this is the idea. This is what you're seeing. These are dilemma demonstrations. That's what they've called them. That's what they're coining them, and that's what they're training on. Now, I don't know if you want to go into the next part, which was the CryptPad.
Yeah, I
that
do.
I was able to
first,
obtain.
I do, and I have those that you sent me, and I'm going to be bringing those up. But first, I want to go back to the narrative you're talking about. They're kind of making it so he's darned if he does and darned if he doesn't, right? And I said that this morning to Trevor Loudon when I was talking to Trevor. I said, this is, no matter what he does, they've got him in a trap now, right? And I don't know why he didn't see this coming in to Minneapolis, where you have this governor who's tied to the CCP, you got this Attorney General, Keith Ellison, who's apparently kind of friendly with Muslim Brotherhood and Antifa types, according to numerous reports. You got this leftist Democrat party there that is really the Democrat Farm Labor Party, as I talked about with Trevor Loudon a while ago. which is really the communists came together with the Democrat Party decades and decades and decades ago. Remember, this is the state that gave us Gus Hall, the communist presidential candidate in the 70s and 80s out of Minnesota. And you go into that state, you're going into a territory that's highly organized and entrenched already. And then you bring in foreign powers and domestic groups, foreign and domestic, groups that are trying to overthrow America, frankly. And you bring it right into their backyard where they're already structurally organized. Plus, they bring in and fly in the people that they need. And I don't know if President Trump was briefed and told, okay, if we go into Minnesota to confront the Somali problem, and yeah, it seems as though this really escalated when you're about to uncover, $20 billion in fraud or whatever, but you're doing it in a state where the government has basically been captured a long time ago. And then you send in this Greg guy who now we're being told is out. And I watched this guy over the weekend and I'm like, the haircut alone is troubling to me because it looks like another time in another place. You know what I'm saying? And then the uniform that he wears, it's like, okay, all the names they want to say about these people. And then you dress and you look, whether you're doing it on purpose or not. I'm looking at it going, I would not let that guy go in there and represent me. He seems to be at a central casting. Like they're trying to make him look like some kind of stormtrooper. And then his antics are not adult acting, in my opinion, or professional with the, 1, 2, 3, paper, scissors, garbage he was doing in the parking lot. And just his overall attitude. I saw him a few weeks ago walking into a Target and his guys around him. And I thought, this is not someone I would send in there to represent me. This is not statesmanlike. And so does Donald Trump, does President Trump know about these groups and their backgrounds and that they're there and they're organized and he's kind of in this darned if you do, darned if you don't position?
So I don't know what President Trump is aware of and what his administration is aware of, but by the looks of the way they're acting, I don't think that whoever's advising him fully understands the playbook that these guys are operating out of and just how tactical they are, how they think out these moves, how they do scenario war games, and how they plan every move ahead. And in their plans, they plan for his response and his reaction. These are members of our intelligence community. These are Harvard professors. These are people who come from many different walks of life that are working in a coordinated effort, federal bureaucrats, DHS, you name it. We've gone over some of this before where, through the Sunrise Zoom chats that I infiltrated in this investigation I did, I was able to expose how you have thousands upon thousands of federal government bureaucrats, these like members of our intelligence community with security clearances, working and operating to undermine President Trump during his first term, his first administration. And so they're doing it again. And what you see on the outside, the Antifa foot soldiers, the disrupting of ICE, the rioting, the protesting, all of this, the pressure campaigns, this is just one aspect. It's like the tiniest little tip of the iceberg that you're seeing for this massive machine of NGOs, dark money, and power inside of our government. And that's one of the things they talk about. And so they're continuing with this tactic of trying to topple the pillars of support. This is something that Gene Sharp teaches. This is something they really emphasize. And the whole point therein is to essentially force the president out of the country, to force him to flee or exile. Now, that is in Gene Sharp's playbook. Does that mean that this is something they're necessarily anticipating? I don't believe so, according to what I've seen. I think that all they need to do, and that they're aware of that they need to do, is keep these riots and the civil unrest and the information propaganda campaigns going long enough into the spring and summer, have another summer of rage, summer of love. And then they can essentially paint Trump as a dictator and then motivate massive blue voter turnout in the midterms. Meanwhile, Trump's base has already been fractured. Trump's base is not happy because they've been demoralized through demoralization campaigns, but also they're wanting to see arrests. They're wanting to see things done. And the problem is like I was saying with the dilemma demonstrations, they also just put him in a dilemma in general where, if he just cracks down really hard on some of these people, he runs the risk of playing the role of the authoritarian and the dictator.
So if he puts into play the Insurrection Act, as some are calling him to do, brings in the military, as he did in Los Angeles, that Trevor was talking about a while ago, that could be the authoritarian trigger they're wanting. But at some point, he has to shut this down, because we showed with Trevor, and we've seen with Peter Schweitzer, you got the Mexican government and their consulates, 53 of them across America, weaponizing immigration, flooding our textbooks, being involved. You got Iran, you got China involved. I mean, if he doesn't do something, the Republic won't survive. They're going to win the midterms in a flood, probably a lot of voter fraud. They're going to impeach him. They're going to go after everybody that's been in his administration. They're going to be going after and prosecuting every one of these ICE officers or anybody else, and trying to go after Tom Holman and the rest of them. And we're going to be, you thought it was bad under the Biden regime. What they will do in the next one will be worse than Biden, if I'm reading the signals correctly, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they will come in and be way more authoritarian. If they get the House and the Senate, we'll see impeachment proceedings. We'll see just chaos. Okay, we know that that's what they'll do if they regain power. So we have to make sure that we're smart here, and we're tactical in how we approach the situation. And the number one way we can actually approach things properly is by being educated and being aware of the tactics that the other side is using and what they're doing to try to subvert the United States. So I'd like to be able to get into the CryptPad, because this really lays out their agenda and the tactics that they want to use to try to undermine Trump's administration. And that's literally one of their first things, is one of their bullet points is to undermine faith in the federal administration, faith in the government, which is, I think it's pretty successful, right? Like you'd even see that you have criticism on the conservative side saying he's not doing enough, he needs to be doing more, right? So we're seeing that already kind of across the landscape. They're successful in that information
Is
campaign.
this the CryptPad? Is this the right one right here?
Yes, it should be.
Okay, tell me about it.
Oh, no. Okay, this is not the one. The one you have pulled up right now.
Okay, I've got this. Yeah, it is CryptPad.
Yes.
Yeah, learn more about how CryptPad can work for you by reading our documentation. Okay, what is this?
Okay, so this is one of their documents that they've been distributing amongst these groups. This is the same group that I initially infiltrated, this massive coalition of affinity groups that have been working together to coordinate these protests that you're seeing out in the streets, and disrupting ICE, having these big protests and riots, the bird dogging events, et cetera, the leaks coming from within inside the government to try to subvert President Trump. And if you notice, they have each different kind of role or agenda assigned to different avenues in which they have people power inside the government or outside, right? So they'll have assigned for federal employees, people in education, lawyers, legal workers, logistics, social media influencers, they're tech savvy people, they're students or research, et cetera. Okay, so they have a whole wide variety of people with varying backgrounds, varying jobs and careers, and they utilize everybody to the fullest extent that they can. And so what's key here is in some of these bullet points, which, you see subversive social media posts where they talk about making fake social media accounts of DHS higher ups who are loyal to Trump, saying all kinds of leftist things. This is like social media people doing this type of stuff that they're instructing, making fake accounts, impersonation, just creating disinformation campaigns, and doing false claims that they're the person leaking material or doing leaks, so that you throw off and protect and shield the actual leakers of information. They talk about disrupting weapons manufacturers, U.S. military weapons manufacturers, and boycotting them. This is essentially part of that crippling of the pillar of support that President Trump would rely on. Think of it. If you have an uprising, if you have full-blown unrest, and these guys are just going completely rogue, what is President Trump going to rely on? He's going to rely on the military and the National Guard. So a lot of what they talk about in this CryptPad, in this document, is undermining the military and weakening the military from within, which I believe is criminal. I mean, don't quote me on it, but I believe that there are some crimes potentially being committed here.
And who is the group behind this CryptPad?
Okay, so this was this was through the Choose Democracy group, but also connected into Beautiful Trouble, Nadine Block, Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stephan, some of those key players who were in those Zoom calls that I infiltrated before and showed how they were doing the training sessions of training these federal Marxist bureaucrats to subvert President Trump from within inside the government during his first term, and also pre-planning of January 6th. So it's the same groups of people, these same trainers, leaders. They go through a vast array of NGOs and nonprofits, and they have a wide network of various groups that they work with and align with. So what you'll have is you'll have various trainings, objectives. The coalitions will form, they'll form around objectives, and then you'll have massive participation in a whole spectrum of groups all throughout the United States. And the leaders of the groups will come together in what are called spokes council meetings, and they'll meet and they'll agree and to which level they'll participate, and they'll go through their PowerPoints, their slides, and how they're going to do things and their tactics. And I mean, it's very organized. Let's just put it that way. They're extremely redundantly organized in how
Let
they
me show
do
you
things.
a chart. This is from a document called Unconventional Warfare. I showed it to Trevor, and Trevor and I have been talking about this document here now probably for about 5 years. And it starts, with dissatisfaction with political, economic, social administration, creation of atmosphere of wider discontent, forming favorable public opinion, increased agitation and unrest, infiltration of foreign agents and agitators, recruitment of like-minded individuals, all right, spreading subversive organizations into all sector of life in country and region. And it just keeps going. Overt and covert pressure against government, strikes, riots, disorders, sabotage and terror to demonstrate weakness of the government, increased underground activities to demonstrate strength of revolutionary organization. And then you end up with, that's the clandestine. And then the overt, minor military and paramilitary actions, increased political violence, terror, sabotage, and then negotiated settlements at the very top. That's basically, I guess, when they've concluded the revolution and you negotiate the new norm, as Yuri Bezmenov warned about, demoralize, destabilize chaos in the new norm. Does any of this ring true to you? I mean, at one time, our government put this out and trained our military and intelligence in these insurgencies and resistance movements. Does it? And this is what, again, Trevor and I have been talking about this pyramid probably for 5+ years, and we're watching it in real time. What are your thoughts when you look and see this?
It sounds very similar to what these organizers and tacticians, I guess I'll call them, have been instructing and training their people and their groups to do and to participate in. I mean, they facilitate these agenda meetings with people within the government, in our intelligence communities, in our military. And the whole point is to try to get them to act subversively against the United States government. Now, this is the thing that's concerning. I mean, the focus in on destabilizing the military. I mean, you see in this CryptPad, block development of military and fossil fuel infrastructure. So within that, you'll have like them trying to push for more permitting, more EPA permitting, protest industrial developments at all stages. So planning, permitting, construction, operation. I mean, these guys are inside the government as bureaucrats, and they're doing all of this intentionally where people think, oh, it's just, bureaucratics, nonsense and regulations. It's just a bad system. No, these guys are intentionally making it difficult. They're intentionally sabotaging so that they can weaken our military, impede use of military tech development. So they're trying to prevent our military personnel from having and using the highest grade technology as well with some of these, disruptive, subversive tactics. Publicize and protest, disrupt government officials' travel. So they're aware that they've started to shift government officials to using government planes instead of commercial flights to avoid being harassed by these bird dogger, these protesters, these people that are doing this. So what they've instructed their people inside the government, for federal employees with access to government flight patterns, that they can anonymously leak that information out to these groups, so that these groups could then continue to try to harass these government officials as they're trying to travel and conduct government business. You have undermine military recruitment efforts. So this is where they intentionally try to either, disrupt the tables or the booths, get people to interfere essentially in the efforts of the military to recruit people into their forces. Subversion inside this new administration. So this is, like I said before, they just go into continuing to conduct leaks, continuing to gum up processes, feigning difficulty in accessing digital databases, and just weaponized incompetence, really, so that they can try to sabotage from within Trump's government and his administration. Another one is disrupt E-Verify program. So the program that they claim targets immigrants. So the E-Verify is an electronic verification system that is used after someone is hired to confirm their work eligibility. So in this, they talk about if you're somebody who has access to this system, maybe you're a worker working in this field, you access it and you're inputting names, you intentionally misspell last names, you invert numbers on birthdays, you leave off numbers on different aspects, and you put wrong addresses. You do anything you can to try to sabotage that so that it can't run properly and so people can't be found. So disrupt Border Patrol checkpoints and ICE raids. That's what we're seeing right now. So this is in their instructions, where you see them blocking ICE with vehicles, joining in with their ICE watch groups to track them and to monitor ICE and stalk them, which is what we're seeing with the signal groups that were recently leaked. I would literally bet anything that you're going to see an overlap between the participants in the signal groups and the people who are part of these. I mean, it's all one and the same, these groups. Disrupt mandatory military aptitude testing. This is where they have educators that are embedded within our school systems, intentionally giving students like the wrong type of pencils or colored pencils so that their aptitude test can't be read by the machine. If they're federal or state workers, they can somehow match incorrect answer keys so that the tests come up invalid or failing. Teachers can bribe students that whoever gets the lowest scores on their aptitude test gets ice cream. I mean, it's really disturbing, because me as a parent, if I found out that teachers were bribing my kids with ice cream to score bad on a military aptitude test, which I would think could affect their career if they wanted to have a military career, right? I would be really upset about that. That seems very malicious. So
why is there not criminal? Look at it, hacking. You're encouraging people to hack. You're encouraging people to disrupt.
Hacking, flooding systems.
You're encouraging people to fool around with weapons manufacturing. I mean, all kinds of things. They're even calling it subversive social media posts. I mean, I would think, I'm not an attorney, but I would think there are a lot of things here that you could charge people with who even put this out, right?
Yes. And under the hacking and flooding systems, they say bots can make appointments with immigration authorities to turn themselves in, draining resources and slowing processing times for people actually being deported. So, I mean, these guys are tactical in what they're doing. Just flooding the system with fake reports, like false reporting in the fake science reporting, under, I guess, the scientific flaws in research misconduct, for, making false reports, essentially. The whole point is to flood the system, bog it down. As far as the weapons manufacturing, what they're trying to do is disrupt the U.S.'s ability to properly function and create weapons and distribute weapons.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
Part of that has to do with disrupting the Israel-Palestine-Iran conflict as well, because they do touch into that.
How do we know that our enemies, foreign and domestic, aren't doing this to disrupt the country at a time when we're about to go to war?
Bingo. That's exactly it. That's
they're about to go to war
Brennan.
with us. Or they're about to go to war with us. How do we know this isn't, and again, I don't want to be like hyperbolic on this, but how do we know this isn't a prelude to some kind of kinetic activity in the United States. Gordon Chang
Well,
has
that's
on
what
this
everyone
program
should
many
be concerned
times.
about. That's
Well,
what everyone
Gordon
should be
Chang's
concerned
warned
about, Brannon.
He has
Because
said,
the thing is like these people might be being used as useful idiots that have been brainwashed against Trump, and they think that they're doing some heroic act to subvert the U.S. government, subvert the president. But all the while, way at the very top behind the curtain could be foreign adversaries. We don't know. But the reality is what they're doing is they are putting the United States at risk by trying to intentionally undermine the United States military. I mean, that to me just is insanity, and we need to get the DOJ and the FBI on this immediately.
Well, good luck. I mean, what is this? What has this DOJ done? Right? Have you seen one indictment, one grand jury that's come back? One. I mean, I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah, I mean, we're now seeing at least Kash Patel with the FBI came out and said that they're going to be looking into these signal chats and that they found the funders behind it. Okay, so you found them.
What are you going to do?
Are you going to arrest them?
Right.
Are you going to charge them? Like, what's going to happen? Because look, there's something that they can do, which I would think would be the obvious thing here, which would be potentially arresting the people who are involved in these conspiracy plots, criminal conspiracy plots and seditious plots against the United States government, against the president, people who are actively working to subvert the U.S. from within. And then there's other little tiny criminal things that they could probably investigate or go after him for as well, regarding targeting ICE members. Okay. And the point would be, get in there, do your raids, get these people's devices and electronics, scramble their systems so that they can't function as they are, because currently right now they're doing fine. Like we've seen an arrest or two or three here of a street agitator, or with these ladies that plan to disrupt the church with Don Lemon. But that's not really doing anything to stop this machine that's moving forward. I mean, it's like they didn't even
really
cut off a
distractions.
tentacle. They cut off one of the little suction cups on a tentacle.
Right. Those are almost distractions. I mean, not that they shouldn't be prosecuted, but those are all like distractions. Look over here, so they're not watching the really, really big subversive stuff, right?
I mean, I don't know if you would call it a distraction. It's definitely tactical. The point behind the church, what I can see in their own literature, because there's other documents that they go into about whittling away at the pillars of support. One of the pillars of support they had was religious institutions and churches. So the idea, what I can see according to their own training and how these groups operate, my analysis is that the point of doing the church disruption was to try to shame Christians and people going to church and point out their hypocrisy. Like, that's what's going through these people's minds in thinking that this is going to be an effective tactic. I don't think they thought out that they were actually going to be in violation of crimes. So it backfired on them. But if you look at what they're doing, they're trying to go after these pillars of support. That's the key theme here. Okay, so it's going to be targeting military, media, religious institutions, education, you name it. Okay, it's there, as well as law enforcement. And they do talk about working with some police in various cities and states to try to get them to agree to not, to essentially not disrupt the protesters interfering with ICE, to protect the Constitution, which we know these leftists really don't care about unless it suits their agenda. So, I mean, what they're doing is very tactical, Brandon. It's very tactical.
It sure is.
It's Gene Sharp's playbook, which I don't know. I sent you some Gene Sharp clips. I don't know if you wanted to play some of the Gene Sharp clips, because I think it's very pertinent for people to understand that this is not just these are not just protests. This is a warfare tactic that they're operating off of, that was designed by Gene Sharp, who studied all of these uprisings in foreign countries, and over 40 different nations, it's proven to be successful in ousting a dictator and authoritarian. So they're using a method that has been tried and true, that works. Sometimes they have more time, right? Whereas with ours, we have a faster turnover because we have like four-year term limits. So I don't think that they're necessarily planning and expecting to force him out physically, but I think that they're going to run a massive PR campaign for the midterms.
A massive PR campaign for the midterms. So we just had on, as you probably saw, Trevor Loudon, and he said he expects this to continue to heat up into the summer, and that by this summer, we'll see more violence than we have ever seen on the American soil since the Civil War. Would you agree with that statement?
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, these are the same groups that did the George Floyd riots. I was in their Zoom calls when they were talking about and having champagne and cheering and celebrating and instructing that burning down buildings is a legitimate and powerful form of protest. That's a quote. This is what they teach. Okay.
Are we going to, and I'm having to reboot my computer because I had so many files open, but are we going to unfortunately see not only more people die in the streets, but are we going to see police officers, federal agents? Are we going to see Christians, conservatives, talk show hosts being targeted, beat up, and even maybe murdered? I mean, how far will they take it? I guess what I'm saying.
So I can't necessarily predict the future, but I can use the patterns I've seen, and I can use the information and the data I have to make my own analysis. And what I'll say is they have the potential to do that. I've seen that they have detailed ArcGIS maps where they map out where people live, where all the Trump boosters and Trump donors live, where they said rich people lived in New York City. Where are all the telecommunication towers to disable? Where are the bridges and the freeways, the roads that they could try to impede or block in order to cripple infrastructure?
So
they've mapped out the critical infrastructure.
Mapped out infrastructure. So don't be shocked if they start going after critical infrastructure like power and power substations, which are so, they're just got a chain link fence up with some razor wire, which would be nothing for them. And I remember during the riots with the Antifa type groups in Ferguson, Missouri, that the FBI at that time put out a notice warning that some of these anarchist groups may go after substations, power substations, to attack them and bring down the power. I mean, anybody driving around their community sees these substations, a lot of electrical equipment and towers and electrical systems behind chain link fences, and they're not real big as far as the mass area they take up. And everybody knows that's watching what and has a brain knows what that is. That's your power substation. And I had a city council member tell me here in town, you know that where our substation is, and he named the grocery store it's across from. I said, yeah, of course. He said, you realize if you took that out, it would take out the whole town, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I knew it was a power substation, so I figured that was it. He said, yeah, that's it. And how well is that guarded? I said, well, it's just a chain link fence around it. And the FBI was putting out a report on that. I remember reporting on it during the Ferguson riots. So what you're saying is that at that time, they were, I guess, doing it based on maybe some of this stuff they've seen, that they're planning to target infrastructure.
These people are, like I said, they're very organized. They're working with members in intelligence. They're working with people who have worked overseas in overthrowing governments. Okay. And so they're working here tactically and training these Antifa and these people who they've ran behavioral models on and put in those positions. I mean, let me just tell you, they're very organized in how they do this. I mean, in some of the Zoom chats, we saw how you had like DHS CISA employees talking about how they were running behavioral models on their coworkers inside the departments and the agencies in order to see who would be likely to shift loyalties or defect or join their groups. They profile these young middle school and high school kids and groom them up and then they shuffle them in and sort them into different positions within their organizational movements and structures. And then the ones who rank for the heightened activities, risk-taking, extremist ideology, subjective ideology, those ones usually get shuffled up into the eco-terrorism, Antifa soldier type of training and groups, and then they commit the more violent acts, and they're skilled. I mean, I've seen their training manuals where they train them on how to travel to riots and not leave a data trail at all, how to not leave any trail. So how to avoid security cameras, how to transport people inside U-Hauls so that there's no trace of them traveling there to an area, or even lifting passport information off of people who naively post their boarding passes on Instagram or whatever, taking their flyer identifier information and inputting it as their own so that they can try to fly using fake identities if they're needing to go overseas or to Europe or to some of these other areas, or
Venezuela.
Or maybe
we got reports several years ago that Venezuela was training a lot of these folks, and at I think it was at Margarita Island or something. They were training even more of them and then sending them into the U.S. Right? I mean, we don't know who's here. That's part of the problem. You mentioned a clip you had. Let me go to this. Here we go. Tell me who this is and what are we about to play on Gene Sharp?
Okay, so this is Maria Stephan. This is likely the clip where she talks about pillars of support and how you can essentially topple a government or just destabilize a government by engaging in non-cooperation.
Okay, here we go.
I want to start with this quote by Gene Sharp, who's one of the pioneers in the field of nonviolent action, just to get a little bit at what power you all have as individuals and as federal workers. So Gene Sharp said in The Politics of Nonviolent Action, by themselves, rulers cannot collect taxes, enforce repressive laws and regulations, keep trains running on time, prepare national budgets, direct traffic, manage ports, print money, repair roads, keep markets supplied with food, make steel, build rockets, train the police and the army, issue postage stamps, or even milk a cow. People provide these services to the ruler through a variety of organizations and institutions. If people would stop providing these skills, the ruler could not rule. And just as an added insight on this, specifically focused on bureaucrats, President Harry S. Truman famously said, "I thought I was the president, but when it comes to these bureaucrats, I can't do a damn thing." So the bottom line with this is that we all, as ordinary people and as federal workers, have power. Next slide, Laura.
Wow, there you go.
Right. So that's just one of the examples, and that's going again to this.
I want to start with this quote by.
All right, sorry about that. It was replaying on me. Yep.
Oh, you're fine. That just goes more to the methodology of, she's one of the Gene Sharp apprentices. So this is Gene Sharp's trainings on how they can essentially disrupt and pull power away from the president. And that's what the context in which she's instructing is. This is a clip where they're talking about trying to force Trump out. So she worked for the Department of State for over a decade, Atlantic Council. Also, like I said, Gene Sharp protege, and now helps and is heavily involved in training and working with these federal, employees, bureaucrats, officials that are inside the government, as well as some of the protest groups. And so you see her alongside of her associate, who she's co-written her book, Why Civil Resistance Works, Erica Chenoweth, Harvard faculty or dean. I can't remember exactly, but she's at Harvard Kennedy Center, and they've worked closely also with Ehud Barak, Israel's Progressive Party leader in Israel. He mentions them by name in one of his speeches and talks about their work and how they utilize that work. And so the idea here is that, these are subversive movements. Okay, these are highly trained people that are acting subversively and training people on how to do an uprising.
Let me
How
play
to
one
do
more.
an
We run out
insurrection.
of
Go
time
ahead.
here. Look at this one. Here we go. Some audio. It's spinning.
Society
Here we go.
and concentrated in what we refer to as pillars of support. So these are organizations and institutions that provide a government or other power holder with the power, with the skills, the knowledge, the labor, the know-how that they need to stay in power. And these pillars of support are made up of ordinary people like you and me who provide expertise, who provide specific forms of labor, who provide buying power. So if people in these pillars of support withhold or deny their consent and cooperation, meaning they stop obeying, they stop cooperating, and they engage in protests, boycotts, strikes, a whole host of other nonviolent tactics, that if masses of people engage in non-cooperation, no ruler can stay in power, even if they really want to, and even if they use a lot of repression. And ultimately, this is how civil resistance has removed even dictators from power in places like the Philippines, Serbia, Ukraine, Sudan, other places around the world. And the other idea is that within these pillars of support, you can think of it as kind of a series of concentric rings. And, you know, at the center is kind of the power holder, and people who are, you know, in the rings around the power holder have varying degrees of loyalty to the center. So, you know, those who are maybe closer to the center, and this uses the example of, you know, the military kind of starting with generals and going out colonels, foot soldiers, but you can think about this in terms of the bureaucracy as well, kind of going through the different hierarchy, that the people who are maybe closest to the center are more likely to obey, less likely to challenge authority. But as you go out to those outer rings, people are going to have less loyalty to the center, to the power holder. And these people are really key allies. And ultimately, you know, the goal in effective people power is to bring people over to your side, to get them to shift loyalties, to get them to move from the center to the outside. And as we know, and as Maddie, laid out so nicely, bureaucracy is a really powerful pillar. And, you know, federal workers have unparalleled familiarity with the bureaucratic process. They know how to speed things up. They know how to slow them down. They have access to critical information about policies that are being considered and implemented. They can participate in internal decision-making. They can provide or deny knowledge and expertise that those at the top of the bureaucratic totem pole need.
Wow. You know, when you think about this, this would be a good reason to go ahead from the standpoint of the tech pros and implement AI, get rid of these bureaucrats who are, you know, gumming up the system, and you go to AI. You don't need them. You get rid of them. Now, you can see the argument being made for that. So one almost has to wonder again, as I talked to Mrs. Turner today, Courtney Turner, who wrote the book with Patrick Wood, The Final Betrayal, you know, she's like, I agree with you, Brandon. This is a Hegelian dialectic, thesis and antithesis, idea, opposite idea, create chaos and then come up with a solution. I mean, what better way to get people in the government, you know, in the top levels of this administration to go ahead and just fire a lot of these people, be done with them, turn more and more and more over to AI so you can make the system, the computers do what you want without these bureaucrats, you know, throwing the wrenches in the gears. So one has to be careful that we don't see the crisis created, and then the solution is a system that basically implements technocracy where everything's digital, everything's controlled by computers. They turn us on, they turn us off at will. We're social credit scores, we're China. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Well, that's why what I'm seeing also within their documents, all over their little web pages, all over their materials, you'll see their number one target is Trump. First of all, that's a dead giveaway. I would say next
so power is
ICE.
Dispersed.
Oh, I would say next is ICE. Right, they're very fixated on going after ICE. And I'd say third is Elon Musk because of Doge. Okay, because essentially by doing Doge, he swatted the beehive. Okay, he swatted the hornet's nest. And a lot of these people who they referred to themselves as the swamp, the federal bureaucrats, federal employees who are operating in these groups, but also inside the government, they've lost numbers. They actually have. They have an entire map, an interactive map where they're keeping track of the cuts, those who had been laid off, those who had been outed or like ousted from those departments and agencies. So as well as the funding cuts that have impacted them and have trickled down into impacting some of their grants and their NGOs and their various things. So they've lost a lot of money in funding to that degree, and they've lost some people power on the inside. And so they're definitely wanting to go after him for that. So I found that interesting you brought that up. Because the Hegelian dialectic, like, okay, so someone could say, well, maybe it's better to go with AI. Well, it might be better to figure out how to address the Marxist federal bureaucrat situation inside the government before anything else. I mean, if temporarily we have to go to computers or AI, that might not be the end of the world until we figure out a better way to vet these people. Because, I mean, in these groups, in these Zooms, Brandon, the language that they're using is like, oh, so I've been embedded for 8 months now within this department or this agency. So you have Biden, who, as soon as he got in, he did an executive order, and the executive order allowed for their this like climate corps, okay, the American Climate Corps, which was the Sunrise Movement helped write it. Okay, they worked with the leaders of the Sunrise Movement to create this executive order and the funding behind it. The whole point was to have funding for apprenticeship training programs to train these young college kids and young kids into climate ideology, and then filter them in these apprenticeship or internee programs directly into federal government jobs and positions, and have them fill up the federal government
that's
with
the
their
Obama,
people.
That's the Barack Obama, Michelle Obama model of that I talked about in my book, Grave Influence, in 2009. It was called Public Allies. And it was one group, I think Investors Business Daily called it Michelle Obama's Boot Camp for Radicals. And you put these young kids through this program, you offered them. Basically, it's the volunteerism. It's the national service that the Obamas have been pushing that's coming here for America. But you only let them volunteer and serve in far left Marxist, pro-abortion type groups. And then you run them into government and nonprofits. That's what the Obamas have been up to with Public Allies, for years. And again, it's in my book from 2009. So this is exactly the model. I can absolutely verify that. We're going to have to get you back. There's so much here. We're running out of time, but here is her Twitter handle where she is posting so much stuff, guys. She's putting up so many of the things that I was quoting from today were coming off her website, as you saw. So if you want to follow her, just go there and follow her at Millie_Weaver, at Millie_Weaver. It's great to have you back. I know we hadn't had you on in a while, but do keep me in the loop as things come about. Love to have you back on as things continue to develop here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Brandon, and thank you for shedding light on this very pertinent, serious issue going on in our country right now. You're doing the good work by getting this information out to the people, so thank you for that, Brandon.
Well, no, thank you. Thank you. Millie Weaver checking in tonight. Follow her on X, Millie_Weaver on X. We'll be right back after this short break.